Oh dear. Well, I suppose I'd better take a look at this one next. Well, the financial and critical success of the 2006 Casino Royale proved that the reinvention of the 007 franchise had been a risky but successful move. Classic Bond tropes like over-the-top gadgets, cheesy one-liners and megalomaniac villains planning world domination from within their secret volcanic/underground lair had been ditched for a more grounded and realistic approach. And it worked. Casino Royale also did away with the negative responses surrounding Daniel Craig as the new Bond, with his performance in the film making him an instant success and wiping out any of the negativity surrounding his appearance. Indeed, many of the critics had made a complete U-turn and were now saying that Craig was the best Bond ever, which is a laugh considering that the same people had disregarded his announcement as 007 for such silly things like the colour of his hair. So a sequel was inevitable, and Bond producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson were put under pressure to deliver a bigger and better story than before, whilst Craig was expected to maintain the quality of his performance and prove that he wasn't just a one-hit wonder. And this had to be done in a shorter amount of time. This resulted in Quantum of Solace, the first ever direct Bond sequel, with the story continuing on from Casino Royale. This is something that had never happened before. In the past, almost all the Bond movies had little to no connection with each other up until this point. Occasionally there would be references to Bond's marriage, as seen during the end of George Lazenby's one Bond movie career in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Bond pays a visit to his late wife's grave in For Your Eyes Only, and Felix Leiter would refer to James previously being married during the events of Licence to Kill. On the subject of Lazenby's movie, the lack of continuity gets referred to with the cheesy one-liner, "This never happened to the other guy." So this time Quantum of Solace would take place directly after Casino Royale, as in right where Casino Royale left off, as we see Bond looking for revenge after the death of Vesper Lynd. This was an interesting concept, as Bond had very rarely gone out of his way to seek revenge in the previous movies. Only Timothy Dalton's time as Bond saw a full revenge storyline take part in, again, Licence to Kill. So, first ever Bond sequel, first time that the Bond film follows on from the previous one, and it resulted in perhaps one of the worst Bond films ever made. So, what happened? The first problem was the title, Quantum of Solace. Now, when they were shooting the film, it was referred to as Bond 22, and they came up with the title of the film later on. Now, Quantum of Solace, what does it actually mean? It's a question that puzzled even the cast and crew when they were asked about it during interviews. The name does actually come from one of Ian Fleming's Bond stories, but it's a short story rather than a full novel. The name was described by Craig in an interview as Bond is looking for his Quantum of Solace, and that's what he wants. Ian Fleming said that if you do not have a Quantum of Solace in your relationship, then that relationship is over. Now, in the story, the original story, Bond attends a dinner party where one of the guests, the governor of Nassau, recounts the story of a marriage between one of his employees and an air hostess. However, the air hostess becomes unhappy with the marriage and has an open affair with a professional golf player. When the affair is discovered and ended, the husband and wife continue their marriage in order to appear happy to the public, even though they haven't got a Quantum of Solace left for each other. What relation does this have with the movie? Well, absolutely nothing, to be honest with you. In the film, the term Quantum of Solace refers to Bond's clinging love for Vesper Lynd despite her betrayal, and basically Bond wants his Quantum of Solace, i.e. his revenge, if you like. The connection between the book and the film, the original Fleming story, is a loose one at best. It's not a typical Bond title. Bond films normally have such dramatic names like Live and Let Die, Tomorrow Never Dies, Licence to Kill, The Man with the Golden Gun, etc, etc. Everything you need to know about the film is in the title, With a name like Quantum of Solace, it doesn't really sound like the type of dramatic title that a Bond film would have. And when the meaning of the title needs to be explained, it really should have sent alarm bells ringing that perhaps the producers should have gone for a different name. As Casino Royale entered post-production in July of 2006, it was announced that Quantum of Solace would be released with a confirmed date of May 2008. Now, considering that the movie had to be written, cast, directed, edited and promoted within 18 months, this was going to be a very tight schedule to keep. The film was later delayed until late 2008, however this wasn't necessarily down to the tight schedule. Threatening the movie's production even further was the strike action that took place from the Writers Guild of America from 2007 to 2008. The strike demanded that the writers Paul Haggis and Robert Wade, as well as Mark Foster, who was the new director hired for the movie, had to write the film incredibly quickly before the strike happened. In fact, I believe they actually finished writing it literally 2 hours before the strike started. This method of writing the script incredibly quickly to avoid the writer's strike, as well as the tighter schedule, affected the overall quality of the final story. It also didn't help that Foster had never watched any previous Bond films apart from Casino Royale, and had never really been particularly interested in directing a Bond movie until Casino's release in 2006. Foster's time as a Bond director was a chaotic time. It's really a shame that the producers couldn't have waited until Martin Campbell was available again, considering that he directed both Casino Royale and GoldenEye for them previously. I mean, seriously, what else was Campbell doing at the time? Ah, right. Moving on. The script had to be constantly altered during production, and due to the tight deadlines, rewrites of the script were taking place hours before the scenes were filmed, with Foster and even Daniel Craig himself writing the script just to make ends meet. Craig remarked in an interview with Time Out magazine that he and the director were trying to rewrite scenes because, due to the strike, they couldn't employ anyone as a writer. Craig admitted that "a writer I am not," and that "we were stuffed" during those difficult times. The writer's strike had resulted in inconsistencies that went against what Foster wanted to make. Due to Foster's vision for the movie, it's likely that the script had to be altered in order to accommodate. Foster wanted Quantum of Solace to move tight and fast, like a bullet, as he felt that Casino Royale was far too long in length. Therefore, scenes were cut in addition to the constant rewrites going on as well. So with all this chaos going on behind the cameras, did it affect what happened in front of them? Well, you'll know from our previous Bond reviews where we looked at the 1967 version of Casino Royale, for example, that would usually be the case. If it was chaotic behind the cameras, it was normally chaotic in front of the cameras as well. But let's take a look at Quantum of Solace and see what happened. Okay, so Craig doesn't get the gun barrel at the start, which doesn't make any sense. The pre-credit sequence takes place moments after the end of the previous film, with Bond being chased by a group of baddies in a high-speed car chase from Lake Como to Italy. Bond is back behind the wheel of an Aston Martin, which doesn't seem to have any gadgets on it apart from seemingly being ridiculously bulletproof. It's probably one of the best moments of the film, so it's a shame that this happens at the start. It's about to go downhill from here. Having escaped from his assailants, Bond drives to a secret location and pulls the captured Mr. White out of the boot of his car. And then we get our credit sequence. Oh dear. This doesn't make for a very good theme at all. It hardly shouts out James Bond now, does it? I don't understand this. They got it so right with Chris Cornell and You Know My Name for Casino Royale. It's probably the worst Bond song I've ever heard, if I'm being brutally honest. What makes it worse is that Amy Winehouse was in talks to do the song for the film. Can you imagine what that would have been like? It would have been amazing. Okay, so you would have had an unexpected and rather unpleasant side effect that the singer of the Bond film had died before their time for 2 films in a row. But considering how powerful Winehouse's singing voice was, it's an absolute crying shame that she didn't get to sing a Bond theme while she was alive. Anyway, let's move on. So after the opening credits, it is revealed that Bond has brought Mr. White to a secret MI6 base to be interrogated. And M is there for some reason. Hang on a minute. Wasn't she on the phone to Bond at the end of Casino Royale? M was in London, Bond was in Lake Como, now they're both in Italy together. How did they both get there so quickly? And why would M herself, the director of MI6, be there for this interrogation and with only a couple of bodyguards? This is the first sign that the writing isn't as strong as it was in the last film. Mr. White calmly informs us that he's part of a powerful organisation that has people everywhere, including, it is revealed, within MI6 itself. One of M's bodyguards, Mitchell, turns out to be a double agent and attacks M. And here is where we get to the other problem in the film, the editing. Here it looks like M was shot, but the cut is so quick you can't be sure. In fact, the cuts are so quick throughout the film, you have a real job in general trying to figure out just what the hell is going on sometimes. I'm only able to tell what's happening because I'm editing this review, and I can look at this sequence frame by frame and even slow it down using the video editing software that I'm using. It's only through this that I can tell that this shot didn't hit M, but instead ricocheted off the metal pole that had the medical drip on it. Anyway, after another exciting chase sequence that leads to the top of a bell tower, Bond and the turncoat MI6 agent fall through a glass window together and end up scrapping with each other while swinging from ropes. Bond eventually manages to kill Mitchell, but during the confusion, Mr. White has been able to escape. By the way, let me just backtrack a little. As exciting as that car chase was, we probably could have done without that. You could have started the film with Bond interrogating White, following on from Casino Royale, still had the rooftop chase and fight with Mitchell, and then as Bond shoots Mitchell at the end of it, that's when you then get the gun barrel and the opening credits. I mean, that's what we had in the trailer. If it's good enough for the trailer, surely it's good enough for the opening credits. Anyway, back in London, and Mitchell's apartment is searched for clues to try and tie him to the mysterious organisation that at this point we now know is called Quantum. Quantum. So, not Spectre then. Oh well. A clue on an encrypted banknote leads Bond to discovering that Mitchell had a contact in Haiti, Edmund Slate. Bond learns that Slate is a hitman, sent to kill Carmel Montes at the behest of her lover, environmentalist entrepreneur and main villain of the film, Dominic Green. Hang on, I'm starting to spot a theme here. Mr. White, Edmund Slate, Dominic Green. Is Bond going to be facing off against the cast of Reservoir Dogs at some point? Or perhaps some of the suspects from Cluedo? Anyway, yes, Dominic Green. He's the main villain of the film, believe it or not, although you'd be surprised for not knowing that straight away. This guy's a huge come down after Le Chiffre in the previous film, let me just say that. Carmel believes that Bond is Slate and so quickly ditches him to go and confront Green, which is a little odd, isn't it? I mean, Green had just tried to kill Carmel and she knows this, so why would she go and confront him about it face to face while they're surrounded by his armed guards? We also meet Green's main henchman, Elvis, who is possibly the lamest henchman you can ever think of in a Bond film. Oh dear, we're not doing very well with Bond villains so far, are we? I know this is meant to be a more realistic take on James Bond, but come on, the main henchman of the main villain needs to have a gimmick of some sort. I mean, let's take a look at previous ones. Odd Job, superhuman strength and resistance to pain, has a blade-brimmed hat that the Peaky Blinders would be proud of, that he throws like some sort of lethal frisbee. Tee-hee, big strong bloke with a mechanical arm. Jaws, big strong bloke, superhuman strength, and he's got metal teeth. Xenia Onatop, squeezes men to death with her thighs, also has a great pun-based name. Zio has diamonds in his face. But what about Elvis? Well, he's got a shite wig. Observing her subsequent meeting with Green, Bond learns that Green is helping exiled Bolivian General Medrano, who murdered Camille's family, to overthrow the government and become the new president, in exchange for a seemingly barren piece of desert. Bond intervenes, and there's a small boat chase sequence that, although it's rather exciting, it doesn't really compare to other Bond films that have had a similar sequence, like Live and Let Die, for example. After getting away from the baddies, Bond reports back to MI6 and M in her office. Why does the office now look completely different to how it did in Casino Royale? We're supposed to believe that this film takes part directly after the last one. So at what point did M get her office refurbished? Meanwhile, the head of the CIA's South American division, Greg Beam, strikes a non-interference deal with Green for access to stocks of Bolivian oil, which the CIA believes to be the reason for Green's interest in the land. Felix Leiter is there as well, but not actually doing much. This is an unfortunate coincidence that happens throughout the film. Felix is just there, not really doing anything of consequence, which is a shame considering how good he was in Casino Royale. Green also asks Beam to keep James Bond away from him. Now you think at some point, okay, this is going to leave Felix sort of torn between helping out the CIA or helping out his friend James Bond, but again, that doesn't sort of seem to happen either. Bond infiltrates an opera in Austria, where Green and various other members of Quantum are believed to be gathering. Despite a stealthy start to the evening, a gunfight soon ensues, which leads to a brief action scene in a kitchen that, considering the amount of items in that one enclosed space that could be used as weapons or as a shield, is disappointing. Imagine what someone like Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, or even Jason Bourne could have done with such a location. A special branch bodyguard and Quantum member Guy Haynes, an advisor to the British Prime Minister, is killed by one of Green's men after Bond throws him off a roof. M assumes Bond killed him and has Bond's passports and credit cards revoked. With Bond now on the run from MI6, and presumably the CIA as well, he meets up with another returning character, René Mathis from Casino Royale, and convinces him to come to Bolivia with him, where they are greeted by secondary Bond girl Agent Fields, played by Gemma Arterton, who was ordered to send Bond back to Britain, but, well, doesn't. Bond and Fields attend a fundraising party Green holds that night. At the party, Felix is there. That's it. He and Bond don't meet. They don't speak to each other. I don't even think Bond realises that Felix is there. It just serves no purpose for the scene. Felix makes no interaction with Bond, or indeed anybody else. Like his last scene, he's just, well, there. Fields trips up Elvis and sends him hurtling down the stairs, where his crappy wig comes off, and Bond again rescues Carmel from Green. After Bond and Camille leave the party, for Camille to show Bond the details of the Terraria project, Mathis is gunned down by a couple of members of the Bolivian police force, presumably paid off by Green. Mathis dies in Bond's arms in what I think is supposed to be an emotional scene, but considering that Mathis betrayed Bond in the last film and led to him getting his meat and two veg mangled by Le Chiffre, I can't understand why Bond would be so devastated as to lose him. But then he shoves him in a bin afterwards, so he clearly got over that quite quickly. The following day, Bond and Camille rent a plane in order to survey Green's intended land acquisition from the air, with Bond using his car as collateral to pay for the plane. Aren't you going to need that again at some point? We get another exciting yet confusingly edited action sequence where the plane is shot down by Bolivian fighter aircraft and the two of them skydive into a sinkhole. From there, Bond and Camille discover that Green and Quantum are seizing Bolivia's fresh water supply in order to create a monopoly. With the plane down and the car sold, the two of them have to make a very long walk back to the hotel where they find M again? Does she actually do any work at her desk? It seems that she spends most of her time chasing around this one particular secret agent. Didn't she send Fields out to keep an eye on Bond? Ah, well, Agent Fields. Yeah, turns out her first name was Strawberry. Get it? As in Strawberry Fields? Oh, forget it. Presumably this was the setup to a gag that never got followed up on. We only find out her first name from the end credits and from looking on IMDb. Anyway, she's now dead as well, drowned in crude oil and left on a bed for Bond to find. This is meant to be a throwback to the way that Jill Masterson was killed in Goldfinger. M has Bond taken away, but he soon escapes and goes off to, finally, have a proper conversation with Felix Leiter. Felix discloses that Green and Medrano will be meeting each other at an eco-hotel in the desert to finalise their agreement. Quite exactly why you would open up a hotel in the middle of the desert remains to be seen. Green double-crosses Medrano and tells him that he now controls the majority of Bolivia's water supply. Medrano must now accept a new contract that makes Green the sole provider of Bolivia's water at significantly higher rates. If Medrano refuses Green's offer, then Green will deprive the entire country of water until it collapses. Whilst the baddies are having their little disagreement, Bond and Camille infiltrate the hotel complex. Bond kills the chief of police for betraying Mathis and single-handedly assaults the hotel. Meanwhile, despite the difference in size between them, Camille is able to fight off and kill Medrano, avenging the murders of her family. Bond fights with Green as the hotel around them is destroyed by fire, with seemingly only Bond, Camille and Green managing to escape. Where did all the members of staff go that worked for the hotel? And were there any guests? No one seems to mention that. Did they all die? Bit grim. Anyway, Bond interrogates Green about Quantum before leaving him stranded in the middle of the desert with only a can of engine oil. Despite the fact that Green is supposed to be the main villain here, you'd rather have hoped that Bond would have just shot him or left him to die in the burning hotel. If anyone deserved this slow, agonising way to die, it was probably the chief of police for killing Mathis, or the general for killing Camille's family. Bond and Camille part ways with a kiss. Just a kiss, mind you, because he's meant to be still hurting over Vesper's betrayal and death and all that. Though it didn't stop him from shagging Agent Fields earlier on. So this is actually now the second film in a row where Bond hasn't directly killed the main bad guy and hasn't finished the film in bed with a leading lady. Okay, again, it's a different direction we're going in. Bond travels to Russia where he finds Vesper Lynd's former lover, Yusuf Cabrera, a member of Quantum who seduces women with valuable connections and is indirectly responsible for her death. Bond tells Cabrera's latest target, Corinne Venu, a Canadian intelligence agent, of Cabrera's true intentions, even going as far as to show her that the necklace he gave her is identical to the one that he has, the one that used to belong to Vesper. MI6 arrive to arrest Cabrera, with Corinne saved from meeting the same fate as what Vesper did. Outside, M is there, because, of course she is. Yeah, why not? She's travelled to London, to Italy, back to London, off to Russia. I mean, she must be clocking up some frequent flyer miles. And why is she there? Well, it's just to inform Bond that Green was found dead in the middle of the desert, shot twice, with engine oil in his stomach. Couldn't she have just told him this over the phone? M tells Bond that she needs him back. He responds that he never left. Walking away, he drops Vesper's necklace in the snow as the film comes to an end. And then we get the gun barrel right at the end. Why? I suppose you could say that this was intended to bookend the story between Bond and Vesper that started with the gun barrel at the beginning of Casino Royale. Okay, that's like an interesting way of looking at things, and it's, you know, now that Bond has avenged Vesper, he's got his Quantum of Solace, he can now move on, he can go back to being James Bond, secret agent. Okay, I understand that. But guess what? There was an alternative ending to this. In an ending that was cut out, Bond goes after Mr. White again and has a similar confrontation with him that was similar to the start of Casino Royale. That ends with the gun barrel. Now that would have made for a better bookend. Why did they cut that scene out? Having this gun barrel at the end, the one that they actually put in, actually spoils what would have been a good ending. With Bond dropping the necklace in the snow, walking away as sad music plays, but then nope, they managed to completely spoil that as well. Quantum of Solace was the fourth largest grossing Bond movie, but it was seen as a huge disappointment by audiences. Now, although Daniel Craig and Judi Dench are still absolutely spot on here with their performances, even if some of them's appearances do seem a little bit shoehorned in, yeah, okay, but other than those performances, everything else just fell apart. Quantum was regarded as too confusing and convoluted, poorly explained, and failed at many of the aspects that made Casino such an excellent, groundbreaking movie for the James Bond franchise. Dominic Green was a severely underdeveloped villain, especially when compared to Le Chiffre in the previous film. Elvis is a shite henchman. Mr. White is a good baddie, but he's only seen briefly throughout the film, and then his last scene was cut out altogether. Both the Bond girls, Camille and Fields, were completely unneeded for the storyline. Let's face it, there was no good reason why Agent Fields was there, only to get killed off. And Camille's story, yeah, okay, she's on a story of vengeance as well, but her story of vengeance just gets in the way of Bond's story of vengeance. It wasn't really needed. It's actually a Bond film where we could have gone without Bond girls, to be honest with you. Also, the appearance of Felix Leiter and even arguably Reddy Mathis. There was no point to them being there. Like, Felix is just there in the background, not really interacting. It's not until like right at the end where he finally has a bit of an interaction with Bond, tells him where the hotel is in the desert, and then warns him that the CIA is coming for him. Reddy Mathis, he doesn't really do much. He looks at a few photos, he gets Bond a passport, goes with him to Bolivia and gets shot. You know, there's not really a right lot for him to do. We could have done without Camille, we could have done without Fields, and as much, you know, we could have done without Mathis coming back. And as much as I like Jeffrey Wright as Felix in the last film, we could have done without him as well. Wasn't needed. The Bond movies have been going since the 60s, and when a franchise has been going as long as this, it's inevitable that some mistakes will be made along the way, and some changes need to be made in order to keep it fresh. Now, we've only just rebooted the franchise, and already we're starting to have problems. In the case of Quantum, it was a case of riding on the crest of goodwill that Casino Royale brought along. But a lot of mistakes were made due to the schedule being too tight, the demand being too high, and the direction of the writing not being made strong enough. It has some decent action scenes, even if it can be difficult at times to tell what's going on in some of those scenes. Craig's time as Bond has been very odd. He's either appeared in Bond films considered to be a monster the very best, or a monster the absolute worst. There doesn't seem to be any middle ground. Quite possibly, Quantum of Solace is the worst Bond film ever made, and yes, that includes the 1967 version of Casino Royale. Every time I've watched Quantum of Solace, I've disliked it more and more, to the point where I can't really bring myself to watch it again. Whilst at least with the 1967 version of Casino Royale, it's just so completely bonkers and over the top, you can at least get some entertainment out of it. But this is just dull, deadly dull. But things were about to look up. Bond would return in style for Skyfall. Now, there would be a bit of a delay with Skyfall coming along due to MGM filing for bankruptcy. So once again, the actual possession of the Bond franchise will be getting sort of juggled about. But that extra time was likely needed. As when we got Skyfall, it was a film considered by many Bond film fans to be one of the absolute very, very best. But we'll save that one for next time.